Leaves from a Russian Diary. Pitirim Sorokin. Part 2. 1918. Chapter 15. Resurrection.
Today, December 13th, I am writing, not in prison, but in the railway station of Luza. Yesterday about 3 o'clock I was again ordered to go to the office. I entered the room. My wife. What does this mean?
Please, Professor Sorokin, will you sit down?
This was my inquisitor, only today there was in his voice a note of servility. This article in Pravda may interest you. It was Lenin's article about me, the main theme being that men of my kind, representatives of the little bourgeoisie, the middle classes, the peasantry, in their origin and previous activities democratic, and only by unhappy chance becoming enemies of the communists, deserved special attention. The task of the communists should be to convert them into allies. To have intellectuals and educated men in communist Russia would be good for the country.
We have received an order from Lenin himself.
And the Chekist emphasized the last two words.
To send you to Moscow, where you will be at the disposal of the Central Cheka. Tomorrow morning you will start. We will arrange whatever is necessary for you.
May my wife go with me?
No, she will have permission to join you within 2 or 3 days.
May my wife bring me clean garments? These, pointing to my filthy rags, are a little soiled.
Oh, certainly.
Next morning, followed by Peter Ben and a Russian Chekist, I was driven to the Luza station. A clear winter sky was over my head, a clean, cold wind blew in my face. Life, wonderful life, summoned me again. I tried to imagine how the miracle came about, but I gave it up. In one village we had to change horses. Peterson rushed into a house and pointing his revolver at a terrified peasant bellowed.
Horse, in 5 minutes, or you will be shot.
The peasant rushed out, but not without casting a look of deadly hatred at this representative of the government of the proletariat. Never in my life have I seen such treatment of peasants by Tsarist officers. The train arriving at Luza, we entered a wagon of special designation, to quote the legend on its walls. This was a comfortable international sleeping wagon appointed solely for agents of the government, while the people travel in, on top, on platforms, or above the wheels of trains. While the other travelers fast, the apostles of equality sit comfortably in their compartments eating caviar, meat, good bread, and drinking wine. Equality indeed. For 3 days, closely guarded, I traveled with these Cheka officials. Quite casually they told me how they had hunted for me among the villages, how many people they had killed, among others naming some of my friends.
Some of them died quietly,
said Peterson.
But some cried, screamed, and tried to get away. They caused a lot of trouble, those people. Often we were forced to shoot them on the way, or at least out of their turn.
How did Zepelov die?
Oh, quite bravely. He was a perfect reactionary.
What do you do with the bodies after execution?
We take off the clothes and throw them into the graves. In this way we once detected a perfect scoundrel. When his boots were jerked off, we found a hammer that this thief had stolen from the prison.
Peterson's voice, as he told this tale of a prisoner's criminality, was full of indignation. Is there a physician to certify to the death of those who are shot? I asked.
Ah. Such a bourgeois formality does not exist with us. The proletariat kill their enemies. But if a few are buried alive, the result is the same. The only thing that is important is that they die.
On the morning of December 16, 1918, we readied the Central Cheka, in Moscow. There I found, among other prisoners, Professor Kaminka, just down from Petrograd. Soon the rooms began to fill with fresh fish, newly arrested girl and boy students, a priest, 2 literary men, workmen, profiteers, professional thieves, and 2 prostitutes. There being no chairs, we all sat on the floor. Most of the fish were depressed, but 2 students, 2 girls, and a boy who told us that they were anarchists, were in high spirits. An agent of the Cheka appeared, and addressing Professor Kaminka and me, said,
Do you want dinner?
Half an hour later came potato soup and 2 small morsels of bread were given us. The others got nothing. About 7 in the evening the agent again entered the room and said to me,
"You are free to go when you like."
Concealing my intense excitement, I followed him to the office, and while papers were being signed, I looked around at this center of the terrorist machine. There was a pretty woman in the room, exquisitely dressed and adorned with many jewels. Merrily chatting, she worked at a pile of papers. The others addressed her as Comrade Peters, from which I inferred that she was either the wife or the sister of the great head terrorist Peters. I could not keep my eyes off this beautiful woman, this lady of the terror, participating in the bloody work of the Cheka. Any woman outside the Cheka who went into the street in such clothes and such jewels would have lost all her finery, her liberty, perhaps even her life. Her relatives would have been arrested. Apparently the communists, if they could not bring about universal happiness, were looking well after their own. At last my papers were handed to me, and clasping them to my heart I walked out into the streets of Moscow. The thought that I was saved, that I had actually risen from the dead, quite overwhelmed me. I wandered along for a time unconscious of where I was going. Recovering myself with difficulty, I turned towards the house of an old friend. But in answer to my ring a stranger came to the door. He had no idea of what had become of my friend, so I went on to another apartment. Strangers were in his home also. The third visit brought to the door an intimate friend who at first sight failed to recognize me. When I spoke my name he cried,
"My God, but you have changed. You look 20 years older."
"It is the times that move so quickly," I laughed. "In a few months of this glorious era of progress one lives 20 years. Now please give me some clean undergarments. Mine are full of lice." He gave me a room in which to bathe and change. The water was icy cold but I enjoyed the bath, and afterwards the hot tea over which we discussed my adventures and those of our friends. 3 days later I had the happiness of meeting my wife and also the friend with whom I had wandered so long in the forest. The day after my departure he had left and had safely reached the house of a friend in Ustiag, who hid him in the bathhouse. One night he heard sudden cries and rifle shots, and looking out through a knothole, he saw many armed communists chasing a man who was being led to execution. The man had made a desperate attempt at escape and was headed straight for the bathhouse. If he had reached it there would have been 2 executions instead of 1, but the fugitive fell in the road and the communists, running up, plunged their bayonets in his prostrate body. With the help of his friends, my friend got himself registered as an unemployed workman and finally the Bolshevist labor exchange gave him permission to go to Moscow. A few words about my unexpected reprieve. It was the work of my old student, the commissary, who visited me in prison. He spoke of me to 2 Bolshevist leaders, who were friends of mine in our student days, and the 3 of them, old memories being not quite obliterated, went to Lenin demanding my liberation. Lenin, hoping to get credit for his magnanimity, wrote that Pravda article about me and ordered my release. As I was not on parole of honor, I felt myself free to act as my conscience dictated. Therefore, if my activities since my resurrection have not entirely pleased the Bolsheviki it is their affair, not mine.